was kind of sunny, but it seems like the clouds really swooped in. Is the rain gonna come? I guess we'll see. And what's going on today? It's kind of interesting reading this one. It was an oopsie, it seems like. People often say, oh, if they see a drone, they're gonna shoot it down. How about this one? It says, Israel's military mistakenly fired its own drone over Lebanon. That sounds like an expensive error. Dangerous too, isn't it? In terms of afterwards where it would land. It says the air defense forces of the Israeli army opened fire on a drone that entered the country's airspace from the territory of Lebanon. This was reported on February 14th by Lebanon 24, with reference to the official statement of the Israeli Army Command. The military believed that the drone was launched by the Lebanese Hezbollah group. Later, it was established that the drone was launched by another unit and was used to gather intelligence about areas of southern Lebanon. It is noted that no one was injured as a result of the incident. The investigation of the incident was taken over by the IDF command. Man, that's a huge blooper. Would you actually lose your, job or position over that if you made an error like that? It actually makes me wonder what kind of drone they were using in general that they shot down, because here it says, earlier the Israeli army has repeatedly reported that the Lebanese Hezbollah movement and Palestinian groups are actively using reconnaissance and homemade attack drones. Earlier, it became known that the Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett expressed hope that tensions between Russia and Ukraine would stop without escalation, while calling on Israelis in Ukraine to return home. Because when they say, homemade attack drones, I would assume they mean something, let's just say, maybe pro-consumer-ish, but they just attach stuff to it. Whereas when here, you shoot your own military drone. When people say military drone, I would imagine things like a Predator or something like that, correct? Because I highly doubt you could just make a quote homemade drone in that aspect in terms of something that big and sophisticated. It makes me think too, just in terms of topics like remote ID and all that, wouldn't you as the military have your own ID of sorts to determine it's on the radar and you immediately see, hey, that's ours? And I guess this was the big thing here. It seems like the protests and stuff are still going on pretty much across the country in general too. But again, for some reason, it seems like, federally, the people in charge don't want to speak to them. And you can see here now, it says Trudeau to invoke the Emergencies Act to clear protesters, border blockades. The Emergencies Act allows the government to invoke temporary measures, including barring people from gathering or traveling to certain locations. I even mentioned before, this doesn't make sense in terms of the way it's being handled. And it says here, it has never been used before. Trudeau consulted with the premiers about using it in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic nearly 2 years ago, but has said repeatedly it was not needed because the powers to address the pandemic were already in place. The Emergencies Act replaced the War Measures Act in 1988 and is more limited in what it can do, including requiring parliamentary oversight. All measures invoked under the Emergencies Act must also comply with the Charters of Rights and Freedoms. Just read this in comparison to what it was, normally used for. It says the War Measures Act was used 3 times, including both the First World War and Second World War, and during the FLQ crisis in Quebec in 1970, when it was invoked by Trudeau's father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Again, this is just inconsistent with how someone is trying that hard per se to avoid formally speaking to these groups of people here and their concerns. It's inconsistent with how other things are handled just from observation. And I guess with that in mind, as you guys know, a lot of people have been crowdfunding this Freedom Convoy, movement, if that's what you want to say. And they recently did it through a platform called GiveSendGo. And now apparently they've been hacked and the database has been released in terms of who funded this, movement. Their names, for example, and email addresses were released, and it seemed like the site was actually compromised as well, where somebody redirected it to another site that started to play clips from the movie Frozen, and it has these messages here, as you can see. It's actually kind of weird when you think about this message, which I'll get into in a bit later, but what they write here is, "Attention GiveSendGo grifters and hatriots. The Canadian government has informed you that the money you assholes raised to fund an insurrection is frozen. TD Bank has frozen several accounts. You helped fund the January 6th insurrection in the US. You helped fund an insurrection in Ottawa. In fact, you are committed to funding anything that keeps the raging fire of misinformation going until that it burns the world's collective democracies down. On behalf of the sane people worldwide who wish to continue living in democracy, I am now telling you that GiveSendGo itself is frozen. Just from what I read, there seems to be a difference between that January 6th event that happened in the US versus what I see anyways that's happening now with this Freedom Convoy. Because again, you have to consider, as I mentioned yesterday, from the looks of it, it's gone beyond just truckers. It seems like there's everyone from every walks of life expressing how they don't agree with things like the mandates. And they kind of give like a theory here on why people are protesting. It says the possibility that a convoy movement like this could be a cover for a type of Trojan horse attack where extremists and militia groups may arrive in large numbers with weapons. Large convoys of trucks moving in capital cities will look normal given the theme of these worldwide protests. Hopefully, most of them will be peaceful. But given the political division in the United States as well as high tensions between Russia and NATO, the probability of such an attack is considerable. When you read this, talking about things such as it could be a cover for a type of Trojan horse and all that, isn't that, quote, a conspiracy theory, if that's how you want to label it and all that? And it says here, finally, I'll clarify the goals behind this shutdown of GiveSendGo, which will likely be temporary. GiveSendGo has a history of providing a platform for individuals and organized groups to fund hate groups, promote disinformation and insurrection disguised as, quote, protests. Most of their larger campaigns are, in some way, a continuing threat to democracy. Again, isn't this more of a, quote, conspiracy theory when you think about it? Maybe it's true, I don't know, but I have yet personally to read anything that concludes 100%, like say here, if it's suggesting that people protesting are paid protesters from, I don't know, Russia or something like that, taking advantage of how people are getting uptight about mandates. That is just a, quote, theory at the moment, isn't it? Or, quote, conspiracy theory, if you want to be really technical as to how they're talking about things like misinformation and all that. It doesn't make sense logically when you think about it, correct? And it says, sadly, GiveSendGo will restore their systems and continue operating. Also, there's a lot of talks about using cryptocurrency, and NFTs are an emerging threat to be considered. The data from this breach data will be provided in its entirety to researchers and journalists so that the impact of foreign political interference can be better understood and sensible. Informed policy decisions can be made to defend against this growing threat. How is that not a, quote, conspiracy theory when you think about it, isn't it? You have to be fair and consistent in that case. And at the same time, just hacking a database, releasing like, names, emails and all that. How is that right when you think about it? I mean, it's weird when you see people celebrating it in that case. When it comes to topics like these, you're gonna have people with different opinions. But to go to this extent, it brings up the point again, what is going on? Look how far people are going to, I guess, stop or silence these people from, I guess, expressing their point of view in that sense. I mean, you could argue what they're doing is what? Extremely annoying, quote, illegal and all that, but to be consistent with all other protests and stuff that I've seen before, I haven't seen people go to this extent to try to silence, let's say, a group of people. If you can't address, I guess, a point or a fact that people bring up, and your only solution is like here to, I guess, hack them and all that, then something's wrong in my opinion. With how crazy things are, it's like one day I could just be filming the animals, the next day tomorrow, you never know, a nuclear bomb is gonna drop. Literally a nuclear bomb. That's how crazy things are getting, it seems like. Alright, see you guys later.